server through the management studio for the DBA. And so that ability to, say, create a simple backup by writing a T-SQL query, boom, backup to Azure, it just sort of happens. We think that's powerful. The ability to right-click on a database and get an always-on secondary up in the cloud as well, or kind of more of a high availability type scenario, or faster return to operations when you do have issues on premises. Very, very powerful scenario. And those are the kinds of things that we're investing in to allow customers to create this kind of hybrid infrastructure. Another one that's really pretty cool, and it's a combination of Windows, Azure, and SQL Server working together, is the ability to create an application that kind of federates between the cloud and on-premises. So being able to load balance traffic coming in to the cloud, and then having some processing happen in the cloud, some processing happen on premises. One of our customers, Flavorous, which does online ticket sales for concerts and things, they use this a lot because some concerts may not be very popular, or it's a smaller venue, and so sales will be, sort of manageable, and they just run that through their on-premises system. But in other cases, they may have a very popular show, a big concert where they're going to be selling hundreds of thousands of tickets in a very short period of time, and they actually do that processing in the cloud. And so they load balance the traffic. Some goes to the cloud based on the type of show that they have, as an example. So making investments there where you can create that linkage and create a sort of a hybrid application, if you will, with SQL and data platform is really kind of key features. So those are some of the great capabilities that are part of the platform, and some of those features have sort of been there in the past, but with 2014 they really move forward, and we provide a lot more policy and management and configuration right from SQL Server Management Studio. Because again, the strategy is, how do I let me bring the cloud to the DBA through the tool that they already know, which is SQL Server. So that's kind of the cornerstone of most of the investments. If I look in the area of big data and analytics, a lot of our big data work happens actually outside of the SQL Server box, but in SQL Server 2014, one of the biggest improvements there is taking the in-memory column store index, which is what we have today, and making that an updatable column store, which basically what that means is if you have a big data warehouse, instead of writing your data in your operational system and then kind of copying it all over into your data warehouse and then doing your analysis on it, you can write directly into your data warehouse some of that real-time data. And so then when you do your data warehousing analysis, as you're looking at data across different systems, it can be much, much closer to real-time data, which we think is really interesting for customers. And so that's a great new capability in 2014. Another thing we're doing in 2014 in the area of analytics is allowing customers to do Power View over multidimensional models. In the past, we only had it over tabular models, but now over multidimensional, it opens up a whole new realm of line of business applications that have stored or managed their data in those OLAP cubes can now use Power View. So that's a very cool feature of 2014. And it was in such demand, we've actually also made it available in 2012, very recently. So it's kind of one of those features that was going to be in the future product, and we decided to also put it in down versions of it. And we recently released that for SQL 2012. So those are some pretty interesting analytics investments in the box. Other big data work we've done outside of the SQL Server proper is our investments with Hadoop through HD Insights. So our distribution of Hadoop is called HD Insights. It's part of Azure. It's in preview right now in Windows Azure. And it's a great example of unstructured data and being able to process that. So I showed that in the keynote yesterday where we had all these tweets that we had stored up on Azure, and then we were able to pull them down directly into Excel with some new capabilities. Data Explorer is a new add-in. It's a feature of Excel that's available today as an add-in. And GeoFlow, which were the two add-ins we demonstrated yesterday. And
lovely demo, by the way.
Thank you. It's so much fun, isn't it? The way just the data comes to life through something like GeoFlow. And what's great about that is, as I think about big data analytics, our strategy is very simply, we want to bring analytics to everyone. We want to make it accessible by everyone. And because Excel is the most popular BI tool in the world, we're just going to keep driving more and more innovation into Excel so that everyone can get analytics.
You don't know how many in Spain that is a fact. I mean, there are many companies that use Excel as part of this solution.
Yeah.
Solution, I can tell you, financial, but also in banking.
Yep.
And that they use it. I mean, they assume that they have Excel, so the application you make in .NET consumes via dynamic properties all the Excel information, and it goes perfect.
Yeah. Well, one of our big challenges, frankly, is that although Excel is broadly used, most people have it, they still have some of the older versions. And a lot of the technology I demonstrated today does require at least 2010 and 2013. It's even better. We're doing a lot of this real-time analysis, because what we've done is we've taken the in-memory, basically the in-memory column store engine that was part of SQL Server for analysis, and we put it right into Excel. So that allows, in the demonstration where I showed Power View, where you have that workbook and I can click on a bar and it changes the data right there in real time, that does require an in-memory engine to get that kind of speed and processing ability. And so one of our big marketing challenges is to get everybody to understand that the Excel you may be using that's 2003 or 2007 is not the Excel that's available today. It really is a powerful BI tool. So that's a lot of the stuff we're doing in analytics. It's making Excel a much richer tool, and then making it much easier to connect Excel back down to all kinds of data sources, be it SQL Server, be it HD Insights in Azure, be it other databases, other scenarios. Very, very important. Even one of the things we weren't able to demonstrate yesterday because we just didn't have time is the ability through Data Explorer to do online search and find data sets that are just out there on the internet. So we've been indexing all of the Wikipedia data tables. And so from Data Explorer, you can search and find data from Wikipedia and pull it right into Excel. And we can actually show you that in a few minutes. We've got so we've got the demo right here on our laptop. So
did you do that one in your presentation in June in TechEd US? No, right?
We didn't do the online search.
No.
We didn't do the online search. The one in TechEd US was pretty similar to the one we did here.
Because I've seen that one.
Yeah.
I liked the demo that this guy, Dandy, made and so on.
It was at the PASS BA conference, the PASS Business Analytics conference. We did do a demonstration of Data Explorer and the online search feature in the keynote. Kamal and Amir did that. Those are our engineering leaders for that. So maybe you saw that video. But we can show it to you. We'd be happy to show it to you. What's great about this analytics is everything that we demonstrated yesterday on stage in that big PPI device, we can do on a laptop. And so it's fully accessible to everybody. And then the last big area of SQL Server 2014, continuing on that in-memory theme, is all about the in-memory OLTP engine. And so in the past, that was codenamed Hackathon. And that's where we just put a ton of investment of now allowing you to use in-memory technology around your online transaction processing. So we've had in-memory for BI and analytics, things like in Excel and in SQL Server. We've had in-memory in our column store for data warehousing, and now this is where we're adding in-memory, sort of finalizing or rounding out the full portfolio with in-memory for OLTP. And what's both really exciting and unique about our in-memory OLTP engine is the ability to get performance gains with your existing hardware. That's unique in the industry. And other vendors that have in-memory technologies, you're buying expensive hardware. You have to put the whole database in memory to take advantage of it. So you have terabytes of RAM required. But we took a different approach and said, most applications don't need the entire database to be in memory. They need just the tables that are the ones that are getting the most reads and writes, the hot tables. Right. And so what's really cool about the SQL Server 2014 is it will run a diagnostic on your application and tell you which tables would benefit the most from moving in memory based on usage patterns. And then it's just a configuration step to say, move that table from disk and move that table in memory.
You mean when you make a profile and then you keep it running that profile and that information, it's the seed for an analysis, right?
When you say create a profile, what do you mean?
SQL Server profile. If you go to the SQL Management Studio, you say, okay, let's create a profile. And now I will leave it working for 5 hours. Just to check how the company is using your SQL Server.
Yeah,
and it's able to tell you, I mean, some of the approaches and so on. That's what I thought you were.
So basically, it's a diagnostic tool. It says, run a report. Here's which tables are getting the most activity, and these are the ones. And you get like it's a neat little 2x2 grid that basically says which tables will benefit the most and are being used the most. And so it tells you, look, this is a table to move.
Exactly.
It's a configuration. You write a script to say move that table off the disk, move it into memory, and then when you move it into memory, there's several benefits. One of them, of course, is just read-write times in RAM versus disk is going to be faster. But more importantly than that, we change the data structures. We change the way the data is stored when it moves in memory. So most databases that write to disk store memory in a page, right? So you get your page of data, and if a process wants to read or write a row of information, you latch the page, go to the row, do your read, write, unlatch the page. And so all the other subsequent processes that want to have access to data on that page have to wait. It's kind of, it's referred to as latching. Well, with our in-memory OLTP engine, we actually store each row individually. And so what this allows the CPU to do is there's no more latching now by row, and instead each row can be accessed directly from the process, and so the CPU goes from maybe being 50 or 60% utilized in a scenario where there's a lot of latching to 100% utilized. So you get another performance boost from storing it in a different data structure, which we think is really cool technology and, again, unique in the industry. And then the last thing, which is what you asked about at the beginning, we also can run a diagnostic tool that will look at your stored procedures. It will determine which stored procedures can be optimized or get enhanced performance by being compiled down to machine code. So rather than being T-SQL kind of at an abstract layer, it's compiled directly down to machine code, and then that can really scream, really gets fast, especially if the stored procedure had a lot of logic in it. It really screams. And so we're seeing, BWin, which is one of our big European customers, they were seeing the 16x performance gains going through these scenarios. In our labs, we've seen much higher than that, up to 30, 40, even 50% sometimes. We did a demonstration. There was a foundational session that we did after the keynote where we had an application. It was a simulated application for airline reservation system, and we were seeing, you can see like 26, 27x improvement in performance when you basically go to that last step of getting the stored procedures compiled down to machine code. And again, it's just a configuration script that says, hey, change it from this to this, and you start to see the benefits. So we think it's really cool technology. And again, it's just part of SQL 2014, so it's in the box. It's not an add-on. You don't have to learn new tools. And because you're able to choose which tables you optimize, you can continue to use existing hardware, which we think is a great benefit for customers. In particular, if you're in a scenario where your application has reached a performance limit or there's a bottleneck, it can help unlock that. Or if you suddenly see tremendous growth or usage of that application, you have a lot of headroom. And again, the BWin example was a great example of that, where they were reaching the limit in how much they could process based on their application architecture. But then by moving over to the new engine, they were able to just see huge performance gains. We've also seen kind of a business transformation take place. So EdgeNet is another one of our early adopter customers, and they're an ISV back in the States. And they build inventory management software for big box retailers, so the guys that big retailers. And one of the challenges the retailers were faced with is many of their inventory systems are different than their point of sale systems, which is true for most customers. But they were running on a batch, like once a day or every 4 or 5 hours. And so when you walk into a store as a customer, you might go into the front of the store and say, hey, do you have this particular item in stock? And they might look in their inventory system and say, yeah, it's on aisle 5. And you walk down to aisle 5 and it's not there because it had been purchased and the systems hadn't gotten back in sync, right? So by moving to the in-memory OLTP engine, those systems now can run much faster, and so the data refresh is much closer to real time, or basically real time. So now inventory levels are always up to date in the systems based on feedback from point of sale. So as an example of that performance gain allowed the overall customer experience to get a lot better. And so that's another thing we're excited to see. We just kicked off an early adopter program, and we've got almost 100 customers that are starting to take a look at this technology and figure out what are all the different ways and scenarios that they can drive improvement. So that's the in-memory OLTP engine is probably the kind of the crown jewel, if you will, of the release. Or it's really the big piece of the release, and it's really it's really pretty exciting.
Not just for Azure. I mean, for many people who still using SQL Server on premises.
Yeah.
That maybe they didn't move. They are still stacked in 2008, maybe.
Yeah.
And I think that would be a nice reason to tell them, make the jump and go to the 2014 if you want to really get improvement.
Yeah, really get a bunch of improvements. Exactly. And with the way data is growing, just anyway, it's exploding. They need more and more horsepower. Basically, they need more and more performance in order to manage and get insights from all this data. So we think we're aligned pretty nicely to the trends in the market. We're very excited about this release and sort of the portfolio of the things we're doing across the data platform. Because again, some of these enhancements that we're making to Excel and the connections back into SQL aren't necessarily part of the SQL 2014 product itself, but they're part of the overall platform. So we think that stuff's really cool. Really cool. So those are kind of the big themes and what we're doing.
Okay, great. Well, you already answered all my questions.
Oh, okay.
That's great.
Good. You guys want to? Let's get more questions. We can show you some stuff.
Some small things that I would like to ask you. Thinking about my readers, which mainly are programmers, right?
Okay, developers.
And developers.
Yeah.
Any news about data types in this version? Like, for example, geographical information was one of the big news in the previous version.
Oh.
Any news about that? Or improvements about that?
Do you know of new data types?
Right, so we did make enhancements for spatial with SQL Server 2012, but that's not a focus area for this release.
I guess it's easier to work with now, because you always make improvements from one version to the next one, right?
Yeah.
Both performance for things, file streams, semantic search around unstructured data, both data types and just performance were key investments for SQL Server 2012. So we're seeing a lot of just be working with the new version, starting to adopt that for new applications.
Right.
And then, of course, carries forward part of 2014 as well.
And changes in the language, in T-SQL?
No, I don't think
big changes. I mean,
no, I don't think there's any real changes to T-SQL in this release.
So it's more in the BI side, let's call it. Many of the things you mentioned go into the BI side. So maybe the business intelligence studio is being changed also accordingly? Or?
Not really. I don't think there's big changes to the BI semantic model in this release. I mean, I guess the biggest change is the ability to do Power View over multidimensional models. That's probably the biggest sort of structural update that you see in this release. Of course, making the column store updatable is another big one to drive overall improvements and enhancements.
And of course, the performance, because many people that still didn't move to the cloud, they say, no, I'm not going to move to the cloud, but I want to keep on going with the new versions of SQL Server.
Right.
And what you mentioned is, it might be really, I mean, with a well-indexed database, with such a performance, you can notice it.
Yeah, it's great. It's really powerful. And again, I think a lot of our investments have been focused on the user experience. Again, our general feeling is we want to make put the data in the hands of the people closest to the business so that they can drive the most value. We think that's where the most value comes from. And so making it a lot easier for that end user through Excel to connect to the data and find the data that they need has been a lot of the investments we've made in partnership with the Excel team. Because we think that there's some improvements we can make there that will make BI a much broader scenario for more and more people in organizations. And so a lot of our energy has been spent on those connections with things like Data Explorer and GeoFlow, really start to bring to life and build upon what we did with Power Pivot and Power View. So that's been a big part of this release wave, if you will, or cycle. One of the things we are doing as a business, it's true across Microsoft and certainly true in the data platform group, is we're thinking a lot more now on kind of release waves or annual cycles. What do we want to get done this year across all of our properties in the cloud, with our clients, with our servers, with our appliances? Let's continuously make investments to all of them versus these longer 3-year cycles. If you notice, SQL 2014 is coming out very quickly on the heels of 2012, and it's because we have taken the development perspective of let's do more things in a shorter period and really focus on lots of releases and faster time to market versus these big, okay, let's do a really long planning cycle. Let's get a ton of new features and let's wait 3 years to release the next version. Shorter cycles, overall fewer updates, but more updates over time because we're releasing faster.
You mean it's more like on the line of this message that you are giving now for continuous deployment or something like that?
Well, we're going to continuously add new technology and new capabilities to the product, so more features come out faster, and then customers can take advantage of them. Fortunately, many of our customers, especially in the enterprise, have software assurance, so they have rights to all the future versions, and it's really a function of, do I need these capabilities? I mean, you made a great point earlier. People who are on older versions maybe haven't felt like there was a need to upgrade, even if they had rights to it.
I know they're going to ask me.
Yeah.
know.
So. And so now with some of these new features, there's reasons for them to drive the upgrade, and then as we start to add more and more new capability over time, that ability to have access to is great. So what part of the benefit of the cloud, too, is the cloud is something where we just update it. It's our problem to update it and move it forward versus the customers. And so we expect to see more and more hybrid type scenarios where some of the application lives in the cloud and some of it lives on premises. And in those cases, getting more capability over time is a great benefit to customers. So, well, if you guys want, we can show you. We've got the demo here.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
Kind of poke around. I'd love to show you Data Explorer and some of the online search stuff that we didn't.
So here's what you saw in Keynote where we had mapped out the attendee data globally. And so similar, just as with on the PPI device, you're able to do it on a touch-enabled device. You can add map labels to be able to dig into that more granularly. One of the things you saw us is then look at attendees by city.
Yeah, that's cool.
So able to see how many are in Stockholm. We have 100 attendees from Stockholm. One of the things you saw us was find our database guru based on title by looking at individuals from titles. I do want to make sure you were also able to see Data Explorer. Based on the online search. So here, restaurants in Madrid. You're able to, what it will do is index and look at Wikipedia of a number of data sources that have been indexed. For each particular data source, as if you hover over the data source, it'll actually show you what that data source contains. In this case...
Yeah, I even know some of them, yes.
International list of restaurants. So you can, based on the subject, have a variety of different data sources. If then I select the data sources I was interested what the data was, we'll bring it directly into Excel. So now I could actually combine that with other data that I had and be able to do either different visualizations in Power View or GeoFlow if I had the opportunity. Also within Data Explorer, one of the things we showed yesterday is you have the ability to use Windows Azure HD Insight, which is our big data service, and be able to pull unstructured data from Windows Azure HD Insight directly into Excel. So I was either able to pull...
Just take that so you can record it.
So I was either able to pull external data sources, I was able to pull unstructured data sources, or some of the more traditional data sources I had with the attendee data. I can all work with that in Excel, and then I have all the different visualization options.
Very nice.
Right?
Thank you.
This is a great improvement. Yeah, it's really a huge step forward.